was a lifelong member of Brule Creek, and also I understand he was one of the actual carpenters that helped build this church. Norman, can you tell us something about the planning and the building of our church?
Well, the building committee was Ludwig Larson and Will Horton and Gus Abraham. And Ludwig Larson was secretary. He was in charge of hiring all the help and paying everybody, keeping things going. And Sam Klopstead was hired as the head carpenter. Alfred England, Dutch England, was hired as a second carpenter. And then Dick Abraham was hired to help, and I was, and Eric Ufferdal, Lewis Satter, and Arnold Klopstead. I think that was all of the regular workers through the summer. And then all the rest of it was, they donated 5 days to each church member, free labor. Some paid instead of working. And Tim Twitchell did the plumbing from Elk Point. He did the tin work and all the plumbing. Edgar Freeman wired the church. And this church was built for approximately $7,000. The basic, nearly everything was finished for that's what we had in the building fund. And it was finished, almost finished for that. And we were paid 15 cents an hour. Sam Klopstead in Dutch England, Sam was paid 40 cents an hour. Dutch England was paid 35 cents an hour. We worked 10-hour days. That's the way it went. That's why it was built cheap. The labor was cheap, and lumber was real cheap. And, well...
Where did they get the $7,000 that they...
It had been raised before we voted to build the church. We had that in the building fund, the $7,000.
In other words, they had been planning the building of this church for some time.
Oh, yes. We had several meetings in the old church, and then we had several meetings about locating across the road. There were quite a few against moving it out of the original location. But then it was voted to build here, as Will Horton donated this land. And yes, he gave us the land, and then they voted to build it here. But after a few discussions, and I was the last janitor in the old church, or custodian as you call it, and the first one in this church. So that's how I remember so much about what happened.
How old were you when you were working as carpenter?
Well, I was 22 when I started, 23 when I finished.
Okay.
And, well, I don't know if there was much else to...
All right, now you and your wife still are active in the church.
Yes.
And you, do you hold any offices at present?
No, I do not.
But you...
I was a trustee and a deacon for about 15 years. I served for my full terms plus an extra term because they changed the charter.
Okay, in other words, you have contributed a lot to our church, and we really are thankful for that.
Yes.
And your father was who?
Andrus Abraham. So Andrus Abrahamson, but he went to they called him Andy. And
well, your mother also had strings to this church.
Yes, she was one of the original, her dad was one of the original organizers of this church, John Larson. He was, well, he came here in '67. And
in 1867?
Yes.
Okay, and how about your grandfather?
What age? My grandfather? Well, you mean John Larson?
No, your grandfather on your dad's side.
Well, that was or Abraham Olson. And it's out there in the cemetery, Abraham Olson, but they were getting the mail so mixed up in pioneer days because there was too many people named Olson. So they took the name Abraham and added son on it and called it Abrahamson.
All right, he also was one of the first members.
That's right, one of the first, but not quite, because they came here in 1880.
In other words, both your mother and dad's relatives were early members of our church.
Yes, that's right.
That's quite a thing. That's quite a bit. Yes, it is. Very unique. All right. Anything else you want to add?
Well, I can't think of anything at the present time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Norman. We have